Today's archetype will be a very fun one to poke fun at, since we're taking a look at the legendary Goblin archetype from the Duel Monsters era, who debuted in the deck of the everyone's ever so lovable Januchi Katsuya from Duel Monsters. So yeah, Goblins, they have their own gimmick, but their own gimmick happens to be incompetence, if you will. So yeah, don't expect any great archetypal synergy. Well, some of their cards are actually very good, so let's actually dig in and see what the fuss is all about. But before we start, we have a vanilla monster to take care of, that being the level 1 Goblin Calligrapher, which honestly has nothing to do with the rest of the archetype. Well, I guess since he's useless, I mean, that is also the thing he can do in the archetype. I mean, the most use this card has is in an enchanting fitting room turbo, and that is not the most competitive deck out there. So let's move on. Our first actual level 1 is Goblin King, level 1 with 0 attack and defense. And while you control another Fiend-type monster, this card cannot be attacked, and the attack and defense of this card are each equal to the number of Fiend-type monsters on the field, excluding this card times 1000. So yeah, needless to say, this is the type of thing you actually build your entire deck around. But the main problem of this thing is that the majority of the Goblin archetype are warrior monsters, not Fiend, what some might be led to believe, since Goblin Calligrapher was also a Fiend monster. So yeah, it's the type of thing you usually build your entire deck around, and if you want level 1 beat sticks, then just play Skull Servants instead, since it's much more fulfilling and much easier to set up. Next up, we have the legendary Goblin Attack Force, the very first Goblin card ever created, I believe. Anyway, it's a level 4 with 0 defense and 2300 attack, and if it attacks it's changed to defense position at the end of the battle phase, and its battle position cannot be changed until the end of the phase of your next turn. And yes, this thing does have significant historical value, but in terms of meta play, it has absolutely none. This comes from a way earlier time in the game, when monsters with low-level monsters with obnoxious amounts of attack points had to be restrained in the best way possible to not damage the poor meta, who couldn't defend itself against monsters like these, I guess. But nowadays, monsters like these are very bad in today's format, and I don't see play at all. But if this attack force did not satisfy you, then you may be most interested in the Elite Goblin Attack Force, which is literally the exact same thing as the Goblin Attack Force, except it has 100 less attack points, but actually has decent defense points, so it does not get killed by absolutely anything while it's in defense mode. So yeah, you usually run the first Goblin Attack Force because the Elite Force is actually a Fiend-type monster as opposed to a Warrior, which the original one is. So yeah, the original one is better since it's searchable by Rhoda. Next up, we have Blindly Loyal Goblin, which is another warrior, and its only effect is that if it's face up on the field, that the control of this card cannot switch to the opponent. Well, I've seen worse Horus the Black Flame Dragon level 4. Yeah, this is exactly what this thing is. It's a Horus the Black Flame Dragon level 4 without the level up effect, and yeah, it has okay stats, and it's a warrior searchable by Rhoda, but this is not the way. This is not the monster you definitely want to run. Next up, we have Coach Goblin, which is a level 4 Fiend. And while this card is face up on your field, you can return one normal monster card from your hand to the bottom of your deck, and during the end phase to draw one card. And you can only use this effect once per turn. And needless to say, you absolutely don't run this, since you're basically returning a vanilla monster to the bottom of the deck during the end phase to draw one card. And not to mention that this thing is a hard once per turn for some reason for a card this old. Yeah, consistency boosting in the old meta sure was one of the more restricted things out there, wasn't it? Anyway, yeah, I mean, you can use it if you want to reset a Rescue Rabbit play, but come on now, who gives a shit about this sort of slow effect? No one, I'll tell you who. Anyway, next up we have Goblin Black Ops on a Beast Warrior this time, a level 4 with 1300 attack and 0 defense. And this card can attack your opponent directly, and if this card attacks, it is changed to defense position until the end of the battle phase. And this card's battle position cannot be changed, just like the original Goblin attack force, except with a card effect. So, okay, so we're seeing some improvement. At least we get a 1300 attack direct attacker, which is honestly a very nice value for a direct attacker. I mean, what Giraffe is, it just has 100 less attack points for a level 4 direct attacker, so it's pretty good. It's also searchable by Fire Formation Tenki since it's a Beast Warrior, and it also gains additional attack because of Fire Formation Tenki. I mean like 100 more attack, but still 1400 attack for a direct attacker is a very powerful effect, and not to mention you can even switch the switch it back to attack position via a card effect, and I believe one more card in the archetype actually does allow it to do so. So yeah, Goblin Black Ops is actually a good card, so yeah. Next up we have Goblin Decoy Squad. This is a warrior with 1000 attack and 0 defense. The majority of them actually have 0 defense, so they're resummonable, but they are searchable by Flamewell Pwn if you really feel like it. Anyway, when this card inflicts battle damage to your opponent, you can draw one card, and if this card attacks, it is changed to defense position, and the same restriction but as Goblin Black Ops, meaning you can switch them and with a card effect. And yeah, this is actually also somewhat good, because you can always play Moon Mirror Shield in order to make this thing beat over everything, including kaijus, so yeah. Not to mention that this thing is also a warrior, meaning it's searchable, and Hidden Armory can also search out Moon Mirror Shield, and Power Tool Dragon exists for Moon Mirror Shield, so you get the point. The +1 is always appreciated, so yeah, Goblin Decoy Squad is actually quite good. Next up we have Goblin Recon Squad, another warrior, but this one with 1700 attack. And if this card successfully attacks directly, you can look at one random card in your opponent's hand, and if it is a spell card, send it to the graveyard. And if this card attacks, it has the same effect as Goblin Black Ops and Decoy Squad. And this one is also somewhat good, but a little specific at that. But okay, it's not the best, since it needs to specifically attack directly in order to get its effect off, and it isn't a direct attacker just like Black Ops. But at least you get a peek at the opponent's hand, I guess. I mean, you get to send a spell card to the graveyard, but by the time this card hits the field and attacks directly, all the spell cards in your opponent's hand are usually activated and not present in the hand, unless, I don't know, they're gathering the Destiny board, maybe? And even then those pieces mostly remain in the deck, so you can skip this one. Next up we have a very commonly ran goblin, that being Goblinbergh. It's a level 4 with 1400 attack, a warrior, and when this card is normal summoned, you can special summon one level 4 or lower monster from your hand, and also after that change this card to defense position. So yeah, this is by far the only goblin with a special summoning condition, and not to mention a very good special summoning condition, because this thing is essentially a 3-off staple in any rank 4 build, because normal summoning this equals an instant rank 4 monster. So yeah, if you have this thing in hand, you basically have you can basically summon Utopia the Lightning immediately. So yeah, you can also summon any other lower level monsters for some synchro plays or link plays. Yeah, Goblinbergh is a 3-off staple no matter the build. Next up we have Goblin Marauding Squad. This is a Beast Warrior with 1900 attack, and when this card declares an attack, your opponent cannot activate cards or effects, and if this card attacks, it is changed to defense position until the end of the battle phase, and its battle position cannot be changed, but unlike Black Ops or Decoy Squad or Recon Squad, it has the original Goblin Attack Force and Elite Attack Force limitation, where it cannot be changed at all until your next turn, at the end of your next turn. So yeah, the only relevant thing about this thing is being low level high attack beat stick which has an Armade's shutdown effect, which is decent but not enough for a level 4 monster to see constant play. Yeah, it's searchable by fire formation, and that's the best thing about it, but not particularly enough to consider getting it to ride the meta game. Anyway, next up we have Goblin of Greed. This is a fiend monster with 1000 attack and 1800 defense. And as long as this card remains face up on your side of the field, neither player can activate any effect by discarding from his or her hand. So obviously this pretty much straight up shuts down Dark World. And fun fact, this card was actually used as a tech option in Dark World formats where Dark Worlds were actually commonly used in the game. So yeah, if you're actually playing against a Dark World deck or any deck that focuses on discarding, for example Infernities, if you summon this against Infernities, you can also pretty much instantly win, since the majority of their monsters don't even get their effects off when they're summoned. So yeah. Next up we have Goblin Pothole Squad. This is another warrior with 1500 attack, and when this card is normal summoned, trap cards cannot be activated. Also, trap hole trap cards cannot be activated when a monster is summoned except Dark Trap Hole. Dark Trap Hole, if you're wondering from my Trap Tricks video, is actually a card that does not belong to the archetype because the TCG's localization team proved their incompetence yet again in just changing the card's name to something which it isn't in the OCG version. So thus it does not fall under this archetype. But as this card goes, yeah, it's basically immune to every single trap card upon it being summoned, including trap calls, I know. And not to mention it completely shuts down trap tricks and trap holes, which is absolutely hilarious for a level 4 monster. Yeah, I'd say run as a tech option at least. Next up we have Scrounging Goblin. If this card inflicts battle damage to your opponent, they can hand you one card from their hand to negate this effect. Otherwise you add one Goblin card from your deck to your hand except Goblin Fan, which is another card that Konami of America screwed up translating. And yeah, needless to say, it's a pretty funny effect. You basically offer the opponent to basically discard a card and potentially potentially set up their graveyard, or no, this is actually an exchange effect. What am I saying? Yeah, basically they give you something from your hand, which 99% chance you won't be needing at the moment, since the opponent's hand will most likely be filled with stuff you don't need or unsummonable boss monsters even. And if they don't, which is also quite possible, since if this thing is on the field, the opponent's hands will most likely be empty. You get to add any goblin monster from your deck to your hand. Yeah, this is the only card in the archetype so far that searches out the entire archetype, and it's very slow and inefficient at doing so because this thing needs to inflict battle damage in order to do it. With 1000 attack, I mean, you can use Moon Mirror Shield to beat pretty much over everything. But, again, who would want to waste a Moon Mirror Shield on a Scrounging Goblin? No one, I tell you. Next up we have Goblin Zombie. This one is a zombie type monster, no shit. And when this card inflicts battle damage to your opponent, you can send the top card from their deck to the graveyard, and when this card is sent from the field to the graveyard, you can add a zombie type monster with 1200 or less defense from your deck to your hand. In pure goblin decks, completely useless on its own, as it can only search itself out in a pure goblin deck. But actually this thing actually sees constant play in all zombie decks because most, if not all, zombies have defense which are less than 1200 and are actually straight up 0, like goblin monsters, I know. And yeah, this pretty much searches out every single zombie monster, well, most of them, in the game. So yeah, it's a fantastic 3-off staple in zombies, but a 2-off staple in a 0-off staple in actual goblins. 2-off, what was I thinking? Alright, next up we have Giant Orc, which some of you might be thinking, what the hell is this supposed to be to do in goblins? And we'll see. If this card attacks, it is changed to defense position, and yeah, its only effect is that is the Goblin attack force effect, but the cost of having 100 less attack points. However, here comes second Goblin, which is a Fiend Union monster, a level 1 Union monster, and that with 100 attack and defense. And it has the standard Union equip effect, which only works on Giant Orc. And when while equipped on that monster by this effect, you can change the equipped monster's battle position once per turn. And of course, the standard Union effect that only one monster can be equipped with a Union monster. Well, yeah. This should have worked on any monster, on any Goblin monster, not just Giant Orc of all things. Because, yeah, the effect is as pointless as it gets, and by making it work on only one specific monster, which isn't even searchable by absolutely anything, makes it pure pack filler trash at its finest. Moving on to their spell and trap lineup, we actually have a legendary card in the spell and trap department, that being the legendary Upstart Goblin. Draw one card and your opponent gains 1000 life points. Heh, a simple draw one effect at the cost of your opponent gaining 1000 life points, which they're most likely going to be lose immediately upon you entering the battle phase. And yeah, it's as simple as it gets. What else can I say? This card is limited for a reason, because if you actually played 3 of these, you'd essentially be playing a 37 card deck at least, because it's a simple +1, and what else can I say? Run this always in any deck, not just goblins. Next up we have Goblin Circus. During each of your end phases, reveal the bottom card of your deck, then place it on the top of your deck or banish it face down. I'm sorry, what is this supposed to be doing? I mean, you can use this as a convulsion of nature or Gishki Diviner gimmick, but yeah, Archfiend Oath works as well. But anyway, this effect is just so pointless. Yeah, I said earlier that this archetype is full of pointless effects such as this one, but I'm still occasionally caught off guard how bad these effects are sometimes. So yeah, I ignore this one. You'll do yourself a favor if you do. Anyway, next up we have Goblin Thief. Inflict 500 points of damage to your opponent's life points and increase your life points by 500. And it's not that bad, because it actually can see play in burn decks, and not to mention it can even see burn some play in the Fire Princess burn decks, because it essentially heals you for 500 and lets Fire Princess do 1000 burn damage, which is nothing to scoff at. So yeah, Goblin Thief is actually really nice. Next up we have Goblin Secret Remedy. Increase your life points by 600. Yeah, this is just a card which basically requires an entire deck being built around it, or a deck that can support this kind of playstyle, which revolves around having many life points. So yeah, this card can probably see some play in Arrow Mage builds, or like I said earlier, the Fire Princess burn decks. So yeah, that's pretty much as far as it goes with this thing. And their final spell card is Peeking Goblin. Your opponent reveals the top 3 cards of their deck, then choose one to place on the bottom of the deck and place the other 2 on the top of the deck in any order. Oh boy, screwing around with top decks. How ravages can this metagame really get? I mean, you can actually steal an important playmaker by placing it on the bottom of the deck and then screwing up the rest of the deck, rest of the top deck with however you like. But again, it's one of the more pointless effects, so run if you feel like it, I guess. Next up we have Goblin Out of the Frying Pan, a counter trap. Pay 500 life points and to negate the activation of a spell card and return it to its owner's hand. Honestly, this is actually a pretty good effect, especially for the time. Being able to stop only spell card is actually completely understandable, but because when this card was released, any type of Omni negation at the time would actually be a bit too powerful for a measly 500 life points to pay. So yeah, but in today's world, it's pretty much outclassed by every single spell stopper in the game, including Imperial Order, Secret Village of the Spellcasters, Spell Canceller even, so yeah. It's not worth the effort for today. Now the next one, trap card, is also a fairly relevant one in the past, that being Good Goblin Housekeeping. Draw cards equal to the number of Good Goblin Housekeeping cards in your graveyard plus 1. Then select one card from your hand and return it to the bottom of the deck. So needless to say, this was a fantastic plussing option back in the day, and not to mention that it could even be used in conjunction with emergency provisions, which actually spend one format on the limited list because of these shenanigans, since you can basically activate the third Goblin Housekeeping and then change emergency provision onto it, meaning you get to draw 4 cards and then just send one to the bottom of the deck, which was admittedly a pretty sick draw effect, especially for the time. Nowadays, there are eons better draw cards than this, so don't bother with this one. Next up, we have Minor Goblin Official, a continuous trap, and you can only activate this card when your opponent's life points are 3000 or less. Inflict 500 points of damage to your opponent's life points during each of his or her standby phases. Okay, so was this supposed to be like the second solution after Meteor of Destruction, as a limitation that the opponent must have 3000 or more life points in order to Meteor of Destruction to go off? Because I really don't see it. Burn decks don't have much better options than this piece of crap, so no, not worth it at all. Next up, we have ROBBIN Goblin, a continuous trap once more, and each time you control a monster you control inflicts battle damage to your opponent discards one random card. Yeah, this card is actually somewhat good, but it's still a unsearchable continuous trap, which relies on you simply have to deal battle damage in order to apply this effect. But yeah, in the past this thing actually saw constant competitive play due to Air Knight Parshat being a thing, since you can basically pump the opponent full of damage in order to discard his hand and to keep plussing off of Parshat's draw effect. So yeah, it was a pretty sick way of playing the game, and as we all know, since Cypher Lore Omega is limited because of his random discard effect, randomly discarding from the opponent's hand is one of the nastiest effects you can come across in today's game. However, upon someone beating the shit out of the ROBBIN Goblin and the wounds of his wounds caused him to eventually die, he became a ROBBIN Zombie. And it has the exact same activation condition, but instead of randomly discarding from the hand, you send the top card of the opponent's deck to the graveyard, which I honestly find is a much worse effect than ROBBIN Goblin, because milling from the top of the deck is actually very beneficial to most decks because of the abundance of floating effects and graveyard effects present in the game. Next up, we have HARD-SELLIN Goblin, which has the effect, it's a continuous trap once more, and it has the effect that each time a monster you control inflicts battle damage to your opponent, return one card in your opponent's spell and trap zone to its owner's hand. I guess you can use this to counter some nasty floodgates, but this is not what I would call a prime floodgate, since it's unsearchable and, again, very specific to activate, since a monster needs to deal battle damage in order to apply this effect, so it's not worth it. Again, this goblin severed some major wounds after someone beat him to death and became HARD-SELLIN Zombie, which has the exact same activation conditions as its predecessor, but this time you're allowed to select one card from your opponent's graveyard and return it to the bottom of their deck. Okay, so mixed feelings on this one. I mean, you can return a monster with a decent graveyard effect into the to the bottom of the deck, but if the said graveyard effect is a quick effect, which it most likely it is in today's game, the opponent will chain it and then activate this thing, activate the said effect to banish it to the, from the graveyard, so HARD-SELLIN zombie loses its target, and not to mention the opponent gets the benefits of said effect immediately. So, needless to say, you don't run this. Now, for the grading scale. In terms of consistency, I have to give them at least a very generous 2 out of 3 because the majority of the archetype is searchable by Rhoda, which again is limited due to how good it is, but still they can try, and not to mention that also the majority of their archetype can be searched off by stuff like Giant Rat and Witch of the Black Forest, especially since of their low defense values. And yeah, that's why they deserve a 2 out of 3. 1 out of 2 out of 3. What am I saying? I'm getting scrambled in my head. Anyway, as for the power, their strongest monster ever has 2300 attack, and that strong monster is a level 4 monster with a bizarre battle position changing effect, which makes this card rather, which makes this archetype rather dated. And Goblin King is the card you usually build your entire deck around. So yeah, power gets a 1 out of 3 in general. Comeback ability usually depends on some well, what can I say? If you run any of the goblins, it's usually a few copies of each which seem useful in a certain situation in other bigger archetypes. So yeah, the comeback ability usually depends on the comeback ability of that archetype specifically. So, needless to say, it gets a 1 out of 3. Protection, yeah, protection exists in form of... Actually, I don't think if I ever read any protection effect. I mean, blindly loyal goblin is some sort of protection, and yeah, that should speak for itself. And as for the versatility, outside of Goblin of Greed being used to shut down Dark Worlds and Infernities, and GOBLINBERGH being a 3-off staple in rank 4 builds, there isn't much to be had in the form of versatility. However, I am feeling generous, and will give them for a generous 2 out of 3, just because of how powerful this versatility of these few cards is, and Goblin Zombie should speak for itself. Okay, so those were goblins, and I honestly thought I was gonna give them a 1 out of 3 and everything, but I ended up giving a consistency and a versatility a 2 out of 3 because they have something. At least they have something, so that's always good to hear. And as for the next video, I only have one more archetype to look at before we dive into the Collection Pack 2020 as 2 archetypes that remain. And it's another dual monster archetypes. So yeah, this one holds a special importance. I shouldn't say actually importance, but a special position in my life. So yeah, in my Yu-Gi-Oh career as a whole. Anyway, I'll see you guys next time with that archetype, and it's a pretty lengthy one, so be sure to be on the lookout for that. Thank you so much for watching. Stay tuned for more videos and updates. Comment, like, and subscribe, and as usual, I'll upload the next video whenever I can. See you all, have a good day, and peace.